Kia ora, everybody. Welcome to the worst filmed hostage video of all time. First of all, my name is Geoff Hayward. I'm a councillor at Porirua City Council representing the mighty ward of Onipoto.
Kia ora, my name is Brady Dyer. I'm a third-term City Councillor here at Hutt City Council.
Kia ora, I'm Ben McNulty, Deputy Mayor of Wellington and proud City Councillor for the Takapū Northern Ward, home to Wellington's premier shopping destination, Johnsonville Mall.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Councillor Emma Holderness for Upper Hutt City Council, second-term councillor.
Awesome. So tonight really is a live stream Q&A. We're going to get into a whole bunch of questions that we've had sent through before tonight, but also ask your questions in the comments below. This is going live on all of our Facebook pages and YouTube, and our system collates all those questions. So fire away, we'll shoot them up on the screen and answer them as best we can. But just knowing there is so much uncertainty at the moment around Head Start and amalgamation. So we'll do our best to answer the questions. And if we can't right now, we will come back to you after tonight. So let's get started.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with how did we get here in the first place, which is that the government launched a program which was around simplifying local government. And so that program was looking at whether the current local government arrangements are the best way to meet our future challenges, like affordability, infrastructure investment, growth in housing, resilience, environmental management, those sorts of things. And the government has signalled an interest in having simpler governance arrangements with stronger regional planning and councils that are really well positioned to deliver long-term infrastructure and services. And so with that in mind, they developed a couple of ways in which we can engage in that. And so I'll hand to Ben to explain the two different pathways that we've got.
Yeah, so we have a head start or a backstop of what the government is putting on us. So I just want to stress the fact that right now your councils are reacting to a direction that has been set by the government. That is, National New Zealand First and the ACT Party have said this is what we should do. I'm going to stress that for those skeptics out there. So the Head Start proposal is essentially you have 3 months, and I think we're almost about 7 weeks left to go, 8 weeks left to go of that 3 months, to come up with a high-level proposal. It gets reviewed at the ministerial DIA level. If they like it and agree in principle with the government, it progresses for a few sections, a detailed design phase, a detailed proposal, and a cabinet decision, which should then inform at the next election on October 2028. Sorry, I've gone a little bit into your area, but you're actually going to be voting. So Head Start is essentially put up a proposal within 12 weeks, build it and tell us what you want to do. Backstop is if you don't do it, the government's going to do it to us anyway, but that's about all the information we have on Backstop at this point in time.
Yeah, so I'll cover the timeframes really briefly. Basically, the government, like we've heard, put out this proposal, and we have till the 9th of August to get the proposals to the government. Cabinet will then make decisions in September, and then from October through to March, which yes does span the general election, will be the detailed design phase, and that's really where the high-level proposal that we put to the government, if we decide to go down the Head Start route, would be fleshed out a lot more. But even then, 6 months to do the detailed design is pretty steep. So then in March, those detailed proposals will be resubmitted to the government. The cabinet would make decisions in May next year, and then legislation would be put in place in time for the October 2028 local body elections.
I'm just getting a bit confused here. I guess one of the things to be mindful of is that the councils across the region had already started that process of wanting to talk about how to work as part of amalgamation. We started actually in the lead up to the last local government election last year, where both our council and Hutt Cities had a referendum to voters asking if we should start a conversation about this. Both of those were there was a plurality in support of on have that conversation, and the mayors collectively have come to the conclusion that they were going to have that conversation, and then the Head Start proposal came out afterwards. Where we are now is, and I think the best way to kind of describe this is, we can't go into great detail because we don't have time, nor would it be reasonable to ask people from around the entire region what amalgamation would look like. So the expectation for the mayors in writing up this proposal that will be endorsed by all the councils as part of this application to the minister is under what terms or what rules or what principles would we approach how we have that conversation. So it's not even a talk about amalgamation, it's a talk about how you would have the conversation about amalgamation. That's probably the best way I could say it. If you can understand that, you're doing very well. Join the National Party caucus.
And one of the worries with sort of the amalgamation timeframe we've got is that we just don't really have time to have those honest conversations right now. And we can't put the detail out there because we don't know it. We're kind of being asked, do we want to sign up for a conversation? But the tough thing is with the way the government's put out this proposal is that it could take just 2 councils in the region to sign up other councils in the region, even if they decide they don't want to go ahead. Other councils can put them into their proposal without their will. And so that's why you'll find a lot of the councils, even if they're not that keen on amalgamation right now, are still being at the table because ultimately they could be put into someone else's proposal. So it's better to be at the table at this stage to at least have those conversations.
And one more thing I'd say just about that is it's also, I think, important that councils are working in good faith with each other and trying to work in good faith with central government. We do not know all the terms under which they're going to approve or not approve any of the applications we put forward. We are trying to work in good faith with each other because ultimately we're the ones who are going to have to act like the adults in the room. So there's not a lot of detail, but at least there's something, an intent there of trying to work constructively.
I think I'd just also say that whilst we 4 are representing 4 specific councils, this is not the only way that this could look. We're having conversations across the wider region, which includes Kapiti and the Wairarapa and that as well. So yeah, we're not representative of all that is having those discussions.
Right.
And that's one thing the government's been really clear about is that at the next election for us in October 2028, there will be no regional council. So once Greater Wellington Regional Council is removed, the 9 councils within that do need to decide how they're going to manage the services and offerings that the regional council currently offers. So we'll jump to the next question. Ben, you can get us started.
Yeah, so what's the case for merging councils? So a lot of our lines of our geography were drawn a very long time ago. Certainly the border between Wellington and Porirua, that used to be farmland. Today, Keneperu connects seamlessly into Tawa, Linden. It is one amalgamated area. So there's an argument to say that the lines on the map in the 21st century don't necessarily reflect how people live, work and play in our region. And it's a fair question to say, well, have we got our design right? I always talk about with Porirua, particularly in Wellington, we have a bit of a symbiotic relationship in a negative sense. So Porirua own the Spice landfill that creates a lot of smell pollution issues for the residents of Tawa. There's no one around the Porirua City Council table advocating for those Tawa residents. Conversely, Wellington City puts a lot of sediment and waste into the Porirua stream. That flows into the Porirua harbour, but Porirua don't have that governance mechanism at the Wellington City table to talk about those issues to stop that really pressing environmental concern. So there's a bit of a genuine argument that actually as a region we have interconnected dependencies. We live, work and play across each other, and that there could be some scale that comes through from this. I think the other key thing is about the advocacy to the government. So without question, when Wayne Brown raises a stick, he raises a large stick up in Auckland and the government tends to listen sometimes. But he's certainly able to set the narrative. For the Wellington region, fractured between 4 metro councils, add in 3 in Wairarapa, Kapiti, Haurawhenua, if you're going too far north, we don't have that strong central leadership voice. So those are the sort of arguments for, but Geoff's also got a few ones about why may not particularly work.
I think it's important to remember that everyone, whether they're here tonight or across all the councils, will have their own views around the concept of amalgamation. And because there's so little detail, we're all kind of left to our own thoughts and measures about this. For me, I've always been an amalgamation skeptic. There are good arguments out there, but they're usually the ones that get pushed down the order paper. And so it always feels like to me like it's the same old arguments that are brought forward. Now, I want to have a robust debate, but unfortunately, the timing around and the process around this whole Head Start proposal just doesn't pass muster for me. But that said, I know people will talk about cost. They'll talk about the economies of scale. I think that where there are some good arguments are around spatial planning. Certainly, Auckland can demonstrate that spatial planning has been better than having a series of councils. Emergency management, it's a kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, having one mayor to call a regional state of emergency is quite efficient. On the other hand, we want to make sure that the resources of deployment when it comes to a response in an emergency are actually targeted and useful for the communities who are there, for fear that we lose that trusted faces and trusted spaces and tension that we need to have when it comes to helping people out in a really tough time like a natural emergency.
And there's no denying whichever pathway we go down, that we're going to have to work better across the region. The RMA is changing. We are going to have to do a spatial plan across the region, but then there's also the likes of public transport. When we don't have the regional council, we are going to have to manage these things as a region. So regardless of which way we go, we're going to have to work smarter together.
One last thing on that is that there'll be assets that we probably never thought about. They've always been hard with regional council, and we're going to have to start thinking about. One of us is wearing a specific uniform that's playing in a specific asset on Saturday. Regional council are responsible for the cake tin, and that will be something that will become more apparent for people who are living across the entire region, and their contribution towards the upkeep, or certainly the managing the ability for it to be resilient in an earthquake, for instance.
Right, we'll jump into the question that a lot of people are asking, which is, will this actually lower my rates, or will it raise them? And do we actually even know?
Well, I'll bet all the money in my pocket it ain't.
And one of the tough things is that Auckland hasn't actually done like a post-amalgamation review to see if they've got the efficiencies of scale that they were kind of promised 15 years ago. And I think the reason for that is that they're still modifying their model. They still, some of them still think that 22, 21 local boards is too many. Even today, one of the coalition partners has said they will go into the election to change the structure of Auckland City Council at the next election. So Auckland's been there for 15 years and it's still not right.
The bigger concern for me is that the whole conversation that's being held by and basically forced upon us by central government has been on the idea that there are no new revenue tools and there's no contribution coming from central government in terms of trying to meet the additional challenges that might come up as part of amalgamation. So if you're not going to have that conversation, then it means that I don't see how you gain economies of scale by aggregating existing economies of scale. Is a $20 phrase for saying you're not going to get it any sharper quickly. I think Brady's point's right. They haven't done a review up in Auckland, and you could weigh with whatever certainty you want around anecdotes, but it does appear that there hasn't been a tremendous improvement in relief for ratepayers as a consequence of amalgamating the Auckland councils.
No, they've got more elected members than they had before. Their rates are double than they were before, and they've got more staff than they had before. So it's a shame that the one big amalgamation we've had in this country hasn't actually been reviewed thoroughly. Great. We'll jump into another question that's coming through. Will my community get swallowed up by a bigger council? What happens to local voice and local decisions about local things?
Well, looking at the smallest council, I'll take that one. And that is something that we hear coming through really strongly. Especially in our area, it's really important to people, and we know that that's really important to be able to maintain a community voice, which is one of the reasons why we're going out and seeking feedback on that to be able to feed into any of the discussions. I think a lot of it comes down to we don't know yet what local representation would look like under this new model. So it's hard to know whether we're going down the community boards route or whether we're going down like what it's actually going to look like. But we want to try and ensure that any local identity, wherever that may be, is really well maintained within that, because we do understand it's important.
I think I'll answer this from the Wellington perspective as sort of the largest in the room. So the Mayor, Andrew Little, laid out a speech the other week with a few principles. And one of the really key things is firstly, having a democratic mandate to proceed. So that's one of the things that he's very hot on, is that actually when we get to a proposal, you should have the end say, because it's your council, it doesn't belong to us, it's your politicians. One of the other areas in there was having meaningful local representation, and the part about speed running, trying to put together an amalgamation proposal, is we don't even have the time to have that conversation. But does that mean community boards that have really strong delegations and so can look after the things in the city? Do you have a large number of councillors? I mean, and I'm not throwing this up as necessarily something that I agree with, but in the UK, you have councils that are almost mini parliaments with 50, 60 members. I think that could be nightmarish. There is a whole different way to do representation and make sure that there's local voice. But when you are doing this at such a fast time frame, it's hard to build that. But I certainly know from a Wellington perspective, we're very keen that being in the sort of centre, I suppose, of this amalgamation piece, no one's should be coming in here without that democratic say that comes through from the community in the first instance.
Can I just drop in quickly on this one? I guess you'd want to have whatever discussion you have around a new governance arrangement to have all the tools you could possibly have around the table. And so one of the things that I am very concerned about with regards to that absence of good faith negotiation on the part of central government is that at the same time when they're talking about this Head Start program, they're also then talking about getting rid of unelected representatives on boards. Now, in Porirua, we have an independent chair of our Audit and Risk Committee. It was one of the measures that was brought in to help enhance the oversight of expenditure without any political leans on it, so as to prevent the idea of political corruption is another good measure. Now, getting rid of that puts us back in a position where we were previously. Now, if the government says, well, we're not actually talking about those individuals, we're just talking about the Māoris or we're talking about other groups of people, then it's starting to become it becomes a prejudicial decision as opposed to one that's based on principle. But you can't have it both ways. And I think and also at the same time, talking about, wanting to, this whole having to go back and have referendums on Māori wards. We put it in Hutt, I think, as well, where had some of the highest results for supporting Māori wards in their own jurisdictions. I don't see this government being fully committed to having an open conversation about all the different ways that you want to have representation, whether it's with citizens' assemblies, whether it's with what I call mangai, but the alderman models, or larger assemblies, or or boards, whatever those are. I'm worried that they don't want to take that seriously, and I think that that we won't know what their position is until we put our proposal forward on what the principles are of reviewing our options, and then they say yes or no.
Yeah, and ultimately we could spend all this time coming to the table with a great proposal, and the government could say, we don't like that. You guys are going down the backstop route over the next couple of years. So there is so much uncertainty at the moment, which doesn't make this very useful. So are we even ready for this yet? It's one of the biggest calls in a generation on a pretty short clock. Is the time frame fair? Bluntly, I don't think it is. We've still got legislation that says we need to consult our community. We need to consider all of the options, the pros, the cons. The community's going to be part of that. And we've got 6-7 weeks left to get this proposal finalised to the government. We've been told that we can't do any economic modelling or financial modelling, but we wouldn't be doing our jobs right if we didn't do that modelling to know what we were actually getting ourselves in for. So my read is the time frame isn't fair, and they're actually the councils of the region had decided we were going to do this work. It's going to take us 4 years to get it right. And now the government's saying, cool, do it in 3 months.
And to be fair, sorry, I was going to say, even the councils across the region, or not just across our region, but across the Motu, I've heard who were even wanting this, are still surprised by the time frame and are still struggling to get that in there, even though that they may have been ones who were actually actively wanting this particular change.
And I don't want to bring up the ghost in the room or the elephant in the room, but Te Akiwa, if you look at water reform, we've been working on that as a region for about 18 months to 2 years under the government's local water done well reforms. If you don't think we've quite landed that well, that's when we had 18 months to get this right.
And that was off the back of about 3 years talking about Labour's 3 waters reform. So about 5 years in total we've been talking about water.
Yeah, so that's what it takes to land a central water authority that works across our councils. We're talking about amalgamating everything from our council core services into one area into almost 8 weeks to go. And, look, I don't want to keep punting the government, but they ran on actually localism at the last election at empowering local communities. And it's very difficult to square this approach with empowering your local communities to have a meaningful conversation where we actually get to ask you, what do you want out of an amalgamation?
I said before we went live that there's an expression, a quote from David Long, which says that politicians shouldn't set electoral laws like panel beaters shouldn't set roundabouts. And I think it's also true about the kind of structures that you have in place for institutions like local government. We are all on this panel going to one day not be councillors. And the current government, all those MPs will no longer be MPs. Whatever we have in place has to endure longer than an electoral cycle, let alone 12 or 7 weeks. So I see that the arbitrary time frame as an extreme act of bad faith by the government. They don't want to hear from you in a robust way, and we're trying to do our best by being the adults in the room saying, look, well, this is what we can talk about. This is what would be reasonable at this stage. But to not even go into that greater detail because of what way central government has set this all up is, in my view, a recipe for making stupid mistakes.
You wanna weigh in?
Yep. No, I'm good on this one.
Cool. Right, we'll jump into the last question that we've had come in to us, and then we'll jump into your live questions that we can see. There's 14 already come through. So this is your chance now to ask your questions. We're going to be answering them live as best we can. So if we don't go down this path, if we don't choose the Head Start proposal, what actually happens to us?
Really, really good question, because we don't know. But the same people that designed your water reform will be designing your local government reform, is what I can tell you. So again, if you're not happy about how the water reform has landed, this is sitting as a very much coalition government decision at the moment. So
we kind of got told the same thing with the water reform. Like, if you don't make the right decisions, well, we will decide it for you. And this is effectively what we're getting here as well. If you don't give us your view, we will decide it for you.
So for certainly, again, coming back to Andrew Little's view, was that, well, we're better to be masters of our own destiny within this. You know, I think we've all traversed well that this is not a mature proposal or a good way to go about it, but we can be the adults in the room and we can lead through it and do something meaningful. So that is really the critical thing, and why we're doing something like a live stream tonight, is to at least engage that community discussion in some way, so that what we land come 7-8 weeks time has some input, and can, at least the community can see a bit in it. But if that doesn't work, and if we don't land that, and it is a steep challenge, and I don't know if we will, and I don't think any of us can hand on heart say that we will, then we'll find out what happens to us in due course.
I also have concerns. We haven't mentioned this tonight so far, but our relationship with Te Tiriti partners and our mana whenua, who will want to have a constructive conversation about this. And they are going to be equally hamstrung by this arbitrary time frame as well. And what does that mean in terms of our sincerity in wanting to make sure that we see mana whenua as part of that process moving forward, let alone what the eventual structure is? I think you should take that as an indication from central governments as to whether or not they sincerely believe that they should be at the table.
And for me, this is one of the toughest parts of this decision, that in 7 weeks' time, we're going to be asked, do you want to go down Head Start? Here's what the proposal looks like. Or do you want to go into this black hole called the backstop, and we have no detail about what that could actually mean, who's making your decisions, and who's in control of your destiny? We're being asked to choose which path we want to go down. We have almost no certainty about what is down that path. But if that option over there isn't looking good, we're going to be left with no choice. Right, so we're going to jump into the questions. We'll start with some sort of like high-level questions initially, because I can see quite a few of them are actually about like specific like numbers of seats and how models and stuff will look like. None of that is on the table yet, but nothing is off the table. So we'll try and cover some of the higher questions, and then we'll dive back in. So the first one we've got is from Joshua. How much are ratepayers currently paying for duplicated executive teams, IT systems, HR, finance, comms, etc. across the region? This is a really good question. It's one that we've certainly asked at our council, is to actually do some financial analysis, because all those areas you've listed, they are where you actually will see the economies of scale. It's the local library. Our local library in Moera isn't going to service the people in Titaibe. So this is a question we've asked. It's something we don't know yet, but it is something that we will have to us before we have to decide if we're going down that path or that path.
One of the things I'll add into this, so absolutely this is where you expect to see some savings in an amalgamated organisation, but they don't happen right away. When you let go of people, there tends to be a people change process or cost that comes with that. You have IT contracts that may be signed for numbers of years that you may have to either wear out or pay break fees. So it's not sort of you amalgamate on day one and you've got one this executive team that's ready to go. You've got one IT system. You've got a lot of legacy technologies, and I know that our officers and staff at Wellington City, they've been up to Auckland to talk through this, and it was sort of the better part of 6-7 years before Auckland sort of managed the process of these types of issues and getting them smoothed out. So it is not a quick thing that you save right away in the bank account with the day you say, yeah, we're amalgamating.
And there's actually a cost to it as well in the short term. So you've actually got higher costs in that, but yeah.
I mean, one of the other examples to use is Te Whatu Ora and Health New Zealand. So, when the DHB system was amalgamated into a large nationwide entity, the argument was around trying to create efficiencies. It hasn't necessarily played out that way because, again, you have a lot of work that has to be done dealing with the legacy components of each of those entities being merged into one. And that takes years, and also has to take committed funding to do that. That was not expected at the start of the process. So I think, the Auckland situation and Te Whatu Ora, and there'll be other examples as well. I think anyone who thinks that the sticker price is going to go down of amalgamation really should think again.
Great. We'll jump into this question here. Why accept that we should lose regional councils? Ultimately, the government has said they are going to change the legislation to outlaw regional councils. If they're not the government, this might not change. We haven't really heard from Labor yet how they're going to handle amalgamation. It's just such awkward timing with a general election right in the middle of this whole conversation. But why accept it is it's going to be the legislation and we're not going to have them. So this was actually their proposal that they put out last year, was to get rid of the regional councillors about now, like halfway through the term, they were going to get rid of them. I know Hutt City, we did a submission saying it's very undemocratic to kick people out of office halfway through a term. At least let them be at the table to help with these regional conversations about amalgamation. So the government has sort of given them a stay of execution through till the end of the term at least, but they've made it really clear under either proposal, backstop, head start, there will be no more regional councils at the next election.
I think, Parliament is supreme. If you know your law, they get to set the legislation that say that all local government is subservient to them. If you are upset about the idea of losing regional council, or you are upset about the current trajectory with regards to this proposal, in 142 days, you get to do something about that.
We touched on it very briefly about the referendum question. So both Lower Hutt and Porirua asked a referendum question, and it was very vague. It basically said, are you up for the possibility of maybe having a conversation about amalgamation? It was very vague, and both Porirua and the Hutt did it, and it was a yes. Majority of people did say yes, just. Some parts of our city, because we see a breakdown by ward, actually said no to this question. Not surprisingly, the ones that have been amalgamated into Hutt City have still got that sort of legacy harm around the
Republic of Eastbourne?
Actually, it was Wainui. It was Republic of Wainui. No, Eastbourne and Petone were actually in favour of us having the conversation. So like Geoff said at the start of this training, the mayors of the region, the councils decided we're going to have this conversation over the next 3 years. I
think the way that I've described it is the referendums are important about having the conversation, but they are not a mandate to amalgamate themselves. Made that clear when I voted to allow that vote to happen in the referendum to proceed forward, being very much an avowed skeptic around amalgamation. I was going to say as well that, and I've lost my train of thought about this, but I think that it's absolutely vital to remember that what happens with these conversations is that we come back to you, because ultimately we will one day not be councillors. These structures have to endure well beyond our terms of office if you want to have people who have some trust and confidence in local government.
Cool. We're all reading questions that are coming up on the screen. So we've got one here from Dewey. Can you give some examples of where you think it could be likely that devolved powers and potentially even devolved spending power could come down to local boards or whatever might be set up? It's a good question.
So I can talk at the moment. So in Wellington, we have the Tawa Community Board, which is funnily enough a relic from when Tawa voted to amalgamate with Wellington City. They said, well, we want to have a special form of representation. So there, we have one other community board in Makatahari who've sort of out the same premise, but these are two sort of things that have tapered on to Wellington City in itself. So at the moment, the things the Tawa Community Board do is they have an annual grants fund, and I sit on the Tawa Community Board, it's in my patch. It does give you a really good appreciation for those locals on the ground that are doing great work. Probably a better appreciation of where to direct money in a very local sense than we would have at the Wellington City Council table, because you know these people almost by name, address and things like that. Other powers they've got are around roading and being able to close roads for Spring into Tawa, which is a fantastic spring festival, street festival.
Hey, no plugs allowed.
Not quite the Petone Fair, but you know. And so those are
Spring Festival.
So those are some of the things that they do for the local boards at the moment. You could potentially look at things like giving more control of the assets in that area. So Tawa has a pool, Tawa has a library, it has a community centre. You could look at a structure that actually gives that community board some more meaningful say in oversight of governance or funding of those areas. That is the one sort of dare I say, fun part of this discussion is you actually have a chance to reimagine what does the best form of governance look like in this region. And that's what we were trying to do, of course, over that 4-year time frame. So it's sort of how long is a piece of a string, but that just gives you an idea of what a community board currently does in the Wellington City context. But it could do a lot more. But it's really up for voters and us to try and put something together.
Yeah, and I think if we do go down the local board route, that's the bit that's probably the most exciting. Is like Auckland's local boards are very watered down. They're glorified community boards. They don't have as much say and skin in the game as they should. So if we do go down that road, I mean, like the locals in the name of local government. Like if we are going to have a model where there is this big regional beast, that local voice becomes even more important than we currently have.
Yeah.
Sorry, you go first. Emma.
Well, no, I was going to say, I mean, it's certainly come through really strongly in all the feedback that we've had, is that people, certainly in the Upper Hutt area where I've been hearing conversations, want to make sure that there is local decision making being able to be done. And I think we'd be advocating for, wherever we are, having that local decision making, because you know your region and you know your area and you know what's needed.
There's two things I would just want to add to the conversation. The first one is that I agree with Brady around local boards. If the model is that they're assembling to give feedback and recommendations, which can ultimately be overridden by a head council, then I don't think that that's actually serving the communities as well as it could. And I don't have the answer about whether or not that would be how you would deal with directly linking funding to community organisations. But what I'm also equally worried about is, in Porirua, until recently, we had village planning as a feature where community groups would apply to a pool, which was for the entire city, and they would be able to get away from the politicians and actually advocating for specific projects. The problem with that was that for those communities who are well established or have individuals who feel comfortable and confident to get into the bureaucracies, who are confident in speaking in English, who are confident in using the online resources, they will be the ones who will be able to be advantaged more readily than those communities who aren't as well established and do not have those capabilities. And I do worry that likewise, the nature of local boards may be seen as a panacea to the bigger issue of how do you ensure that representatives around the table truly reflect the communities of interest. Because if you have a large enough ward, then you could have the possibility where you don't have that diverse range of views. In Porirua, we have still got representatives from our Pasifika, from our Māori communities. Yes, we've got our share of older individuals as well, but the point being is that we are far more like our communities than perhaps many other councils are around the country. We don't want to lose that. The second part of this too is, and I can't stress this enough, there are community boards, but what happens to the voice of those communities where geography is not a factor? Those with accessibility issues, rangatahi, Pasifika, migrant communities, and also mātawaka. So we have an opportunity here to think about, do we have a toolbox in the conversation around a new amalgamated council that would actually be able to show legitimacy for those individuals, those communities, without this turning into the tyranny of the majority.
There's one other quick thing I'll add on to this as well, that most people, I mean, if you're watching this, you're in a select few that know who your city councillors are, but in the wider world of the public, most people don't tend to know who their representatives are. When you create a community board level, you create an even more sort of at arm's length model away from people's awareness. And, I think four of us spend a lot of time on, communicating and using our platform to tell people what we're doing, but having a community board level with meaningful decisions, if you don't know who your councillors are, you've probably got a very short shot of actually knowing who your community board members are and then being able to have those conversations and influence them. So even though they can be a structure that's closer to the ground, they can also be, in a sense, less accountable because people don't know who they are.
And just going back to Geoff's first point around the it brings up the idea of the fact that we have a lot of people in the Upper Hutt City Council who work really closely with community members to help them to be able to make submissions for things, to be able to help them to do all of that on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah.
And I think when we, whilst things like shared services in the back offices certainly save money, it also creates a disconnect within the community that we don't have those people on the ground to be able to sit with people and go through submission forms and to be able to really flesh out for those people who maybe are not quite so internet savvy or not able to use transport links to actually get into whatever central offices they might have.
Or don't want to use Facebook, or don't want to use LinkedIn.
Yes.
The equity
Yeah.
challenges are abound and cannot be ignored.
Right, we're done with this one. I'll try and summarize it because it's quite a big question. But the gist of it is the time frame suboptimal, which we've already covered that. The shotgun marriage, as you call it, I think does risk a suboptimal model with our communities, because we don't have the time to talk with our communities. If so, given the polls predict a tight general election this November, would you agree that the most effective thing ratepayers can do right now is write to, I'm assuming that's saying the ministers, to ask them to pause this until after the election? I can't see the rest of your question because it's so long. But yeah, I mean, it's very awkward timing that there's a general election right in the middle of this. We don't know what Labour is really proposing to do if they win, or if they're governing after the next election, how they're going to handle these reforms. It would be quite useful, I think, to hear from them, to know what are you going to do about these things, because ultimately there's an election right in the middle of all this happening.
And I mean, just this election year, so what you're going to start noticing is a lot of community meetings popping up across the region. I think ACT had one here in Lower Hutt the other night. This is, and I stress it again, the policy of not just national ACT, it is your national ACT and New Zealand First together. If they are having a meeting in your community and you do not like the amalgamation, go ahead and talk to them and talk to them and actually say that you don't like it. You have an ability on the ground. And look, Three Waters was resoundingly rejected by New Zealanders. I have a feeling that when these discussions get a bit more advanced and the people in Queenstown Lakes have the idea of getting governed out of Dunedin and these sort of other massive amalgamations come onto the picture, that the government's going to realise they're probably bit off a bit more than they can chew. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some kind of back down. But right now it's actually that awareness and you talking to your elected members across the parliament and across parties and going in person and actually saying what you're doing here, we don't think it's the best way of going forward with it.
And like the easier thing for us in Wellington is we're surrounded by a coastline. We're like pretty confined Wellington region. We've already got Wellington Water. We've already got our regional council. It's an easier conversation. But you look at other places around the country. Queenstown's a great example, but Taupō District Council has 5 regional councils in its district. They could go literally north, south, east, or west. There's arguments that Turangi would go south and that Taupō would go north. Like there's a lot of complexities with what is being proposed and the idea that it can all be sorted in 6 weeks.
And also there's the real risk as well, is that whatever comes with each of those proposals, the government could choose to use the same criteria for all of those proposals. So whatever we come up with may not pass muster based on what they want to use in some other part of the country. And that again will just be another act of bad faith.
Cool. We're at 40 minutes. We'll try and rattle through a few of these a bit quicker now. So given the public concerns around Te Aki Wai and how late residents felt, the details, will council commit to much earlier and more transparent public engagement on amalgamation? The short answer is no. We don't have time. We don't even know what the proposal is going to be. The government has given us a 6-week time frame to do it. All of our councils are trying to do things differently to try and hear somehow from the communities, but we're just not going to have that level of detail. We should have it just in time, like literally probably on the day of signing off our proposals. But this is the thing that sucks about this proposal, is that we don't have time to put that in front of our communities and actually ask for their honest opinion and bring them on that journey with us.
With Te Aki Wai as well. So we were having to start building our water model under local water done well before all the legislation had even passed Parliament. So there were 3 stages of water services bills that went through. We had 2 passed and we had to start responding to that, but they hadn't even passed a 3rd bill. So it's kind of like building a house and building your foundations while living in it at the same time. But at least you had some stuff through to Parliament to start that process. Here, none of that exists. So again, it's a point I made earlier, but Te Aki Wai was us responding at great speed to a substantive change. This is an even broader change with less detail and less time.
It's a press release and a shiny PDF is what we've got to go on. At least with Te Aki Wai, there was a lot of legislation to follow.
One of the things you could ask, though, for the council that you live in, is to ask how individual councils are engaging through the mayoral forum and how they are briefing elected representatives. The expectation that I have, having had conversations around the council table already on this topic in broad terms, is that we should show our working from our side of the way. And I think that's, again, trying to act in good faith.
Yeah. And I think like following us 4 is a good start, but also people in Wairarapa and Kapiti, all of us and our councils will be consulting in slightly different ways. We had a survey running last week that's now closed. Upper Hutt's is still going. Hutt City Council's looking at doing like a public community meeting on the 1st of July. We're all trying to do things differently to try and get us to the end goal. But it's going to be really tricky.
And I've had comments about that we're all doing different things, but I actually think that that's quite good because in a way that we reach different portions of the community and we're able to do that in different ways. And so certainly out in Upper Hutt, some people have been holding public meetings. Some of us have been doing live streams. There's all sorts of things happening. So follow your council pages and follow your elected members to find out what is happening in the community.
Yeah, and for Wellington City, we'll be doing public hearings at the end of July, so it's really a chance. There will be some structured questions we put out, but the idea is really just to, in 5 minutes is hardly enough time for someone to come and give us your reckons, but we want to get as many reckons from as many people as possible, at least ahead of the decisions we have to make in August to sort of reflect that. So we've all got slightly different approaches, but we are all trying to do what we can to get some meaningful input from you.
If you've made the effort to be on this and stayed on for this long, well done.
Sorry.
So the question should be, do not be hamstrung by the different opportunities that are out there. We are going to be accessible no matter what method we have. I can put the link up to the survey that we had online for Porirua residents, but do not hesitate to use every method you feel comfortable, whether it is finding us kanohite, email, through our Facebook pages, websites, what have you. But it will help the broader conversation that we're trying to have with regards to this broad, high-level proposal.
And to be fair, I've had conversations dog walking and at school pickup, so feel free to grab us anywhere you can.
That's the joys of being a counsellor. You never switch off. I was donating plasma today, and the nurse that was sort of helping me was like, "Oh, why are you here and you can't go anywhere? I'm going to ask you questions for an hour," which I loved. Like, don't get me wrong. You've got a question here from Louise. The latest independent report suggests a rates increase of 2 to 20% for the Wairarapa unitary. That doesn't sound like economies of scale. So yes, Carsten put out a report 2 days ago. They've done some purely financial analysis that shows that in the Wairarapa region, $47 million of services are provided by the regional council. Only 17 of that is paid for by the region. The rest is coming from the other side of the Rimutakas. So they are heavily subsidised. So if they were to go on their own and deliver all the services, which in the Wairarapa is primarily flood protection, environmental work, and the trains, they would have to pick up a very big bill to keep paying that. So they're in a tricky position where they want to be independent, but kind of also need the economies of scale with being over this side of the hill.
And if I come to this sort of again, and the speech a while ago, he sort of talked a bit about Wairarapa, that there probably would have to be some kind of shared services model to accommodate for the fact that Wairarapa can't stand up its own train services, but those train services are still vital for the Wellington region as a whole. However, you may need to design something quite boutique for how the Wairarapa would fall into, if it is a unitary of our 4 councils, but the Wairarapa needs to do some shared services. So I guess what I'm saying is there's some options to be creative here. It doesn't necessarily mean Wairarapa has to be all in. You may be able to sort of stand them alone and do other methods, but this comes into the clear issue, especially as you get into rural areas, how they get to afford their services, but also what their representation looks like. Because if we did have a massive council Wairarapa coming into there, 1-2 councillors, that would be swamped in terms of community voice when you take the geography or populations of Wellington or Lower Hutt. So tricky issues.
Right, we'll jump into this one here, which touches a bit on the time frame, which we kind of skimmed over at the start. If amalgamation happens, what does the mayoralty look like? Is there an interim board? So under the government's current proposal, they are wanting to get the proposals, sign it off, and have legislation in place so that the next election, 2028, will be electing under the new regime. If we don't go down Head Start, then there'll be a normal election in 2028 where you'll elect exactly like you just have under the last election, local body election. And then for the next 3 years, we've effectively got 3 years to work on an amalgamation proposal. How the structure of that is going to work is a bit unknown at this stage. There was talk of all the mayors of the region forming a group with maybe some Crown observers on there. That's the bit we don't really know about yet as to what the form will be if we don't do it in the Head Start.
It's nightmarish to think that, that question alone hasn't been thought out by the government before putting this out, because that is, in the end, one of the most important decisions about who will be representing you, not just mayors, but councillors.
Yeah,
there's lots of questions. Well done to everybody for bringing them in.
Yeah, I'm sure, because there's so many, and we're we haven't got a lot of time, but we'll stay as long as we need. But there are a lot of statements as well. Ben, do you want to respond to this one? Putting you on the spot now.
The end of the day, we are responding to a government direction that is wanting to see more centralisation. If you've taken a first-year legal paper in university, you understand that Parliament is sovereign. All of New Zealand's legislative authority sits in the Parliament. Parliament then says, actually, these things, we're going to create local government, you can do it. But they are the masters of our destiny. So when it comes to jumping, if the government say jump, we as local government say how high.
I've been reading up a fair bit about other jurisdictions in the lead up to this. Canada went through similar reforms about 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. Different provinces did it. But again, they are also, like New Zealand, the local government and provincial government are ultimately held to the federal system. So the parliament is supreme as well. There is plenty of debate on why we don't have provincial governments here in New Zealand anymore. But you can go back and look through the history books as to why that fell over and why I think as a consequence, we've as a people have got very uncomfortable about the idea of having a separate institution that could have its own ability to set its own course with regards to representation. We are stuck where we are.
Sandra's asked, has anyone thought about visiting one of the smaller councils in Auckland? And this is one of the really good things that is actually happening. We've had previous mayors and deputy mayors of the smaller councils that were gobbled up. And we've also had the mayors that weren't gobbled up that were on the other side of amalgamation in Auckland. Local Government New Zealand, who's sort of the advocacy body for local government, has done a really good job in also a really short amount of time of getting some really good speakers in front of us to hear both sides of the argument. So this is definitely happening, rest assured. Andrew,
Question,
yeah, could we amalgamate without Porirua and Wellington, who have the highest rates?
First of all, I just want to say we got 0% for next year. Okay,
we're not going to go there.
Yeah.
Creative accounting.
Thank you, QV. Independent QV.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really interesting and a real challenge is that if you do amalgamate, you have commercial rates that are set at different differentials across the region. So Wellington City has the highest commercial differential in the country. We're shortly going to be consulting about looking at options to bring that down, albeit an amalgamation will probably force that anyway. But Wellington City's residential ratepayers are very heavily subsidised by our commercial ratepayers. In an amalgamated council, that subsidisation would go across a broader subset. But you also need to think, should you have the same commercial rate in Wellington CBD as in Lower Hutt CBD, as in Upper Hutt CBD? Do you have, call them regional CBDs, that you have a lower different level of rates because you don't have the same level of council services? So there's a really tricky, harmonising the rates in itself, if there is an amalgamation, is going to take a very long time, and it will be an incredibly difficult technical piece of work about what's fair, who pays what, because there will be winners and losers in that equation.
Yeah, and lest we also forget that partially it is trying to harmonise those various councils with regards to the rating policy, but also the harmonisation of fees and charges, ensuring that there are consistent levels of service, as well as whether or not we even want to, start talking about, land-based or property-based valuation as part of the rating system as well. And the only reason why we would want to have that conversation is because, again, central government said we're not talking about any additional funding. We're not talking about any other revenue tools for you. We may do a city deal with you on something that is yet to be defined and yet to be explained. If you looked at the Auckland city deal, it was pathetic. No, it's no disrespect to the mayor. It's just up in Auckland. It's just central government just didn't give anything really of substance in that deal.
I think he said as much as well.
Yeah, probably did.
And we don't know what anything's necessarily going to look like. There are unitary authorities out there that haven't harmonised their rates, for example. So, but until we actually know what we're talking about a bit more, it's really hard to give some answers to some of these things.
Yeah.
Josh, will the public get to see any proposals before it's formally submitted? Yes, so there'll be a public meeting when the councils consider this. Every public meeting has a space at the start of the meeting for members of the public to come along and speak to any agenda item. So there'll at least be that opportunity for you or anyone to come to the table and give us their thoughts on the proposal. Hopefully we get to see it more than 7 days ahead of it being signed off so that we can socialise it as much as possible. But just with the timeframes we've got, it's really hard to know how the times are going to land.
and realistically, then that feedback won't be incorporated as part of what goes.
I'll put this up because it says a question for Brady and Ben. Council amalgamation happens. Will it still be possible to do public transport modelling for the Petone to Granada link? I can't see why it wouldn't be.
No.
It's an NZTA state highway route anyway, this part of the project. So I can't see this holding up the P2G link road at all. Can we put time limits on the answers to questions? There's a lot to get through. A great idea, Josh.
We have considered whether we do another one as well.
Yeah.
So this is obviously version 1.0 had a very generous offer from a podcast studio already in the city to host a second one. So we thought we'd jump onto this tonight and see if there was even interest, and just judging by the questions there are. So we'll certainly look at doing this again, and whether we could get some councillors in from other areas too.
And that's the thing, like this beast is moving very quickly, but we're having these conversations, and there's no reason why we can't do more. By next week, there'll be a lot more certainty about a few bits. And it's a question I posed to our officers at a workshop last week about this: is what's the work that we're not doing right now? Because all we are doing is amalgamation. Like, we're meant to be starting our long-term plans. Some councils are meant to be starting representation reviews. The regional council's kind of saying, do we even bother doing a long-term plan? Because the 9 years of it's going to go in the bin. So we are getting a lot of information very quickly. We're having a lot of workshops. So I think there definitely is merit, particularly if people have enjoyed this, that we will come back and do another one, and maybe we'll do 4 and we'll bounce around the region. Because if you can't tell, we're in the beautiful Te Awa Kailangi Kitai at the moment.
Beautiful Lower Hutt tonight.
It's no Titahi Bay.
Or Johnsonville.
I think we'll have it at Brewtown next.
Brewtown's a good one. That's all right.
Andrea's quick one here. Ask for an extension to inform your community. I mean, this is a great suggestion. It's one we could definitely put forward. The government's worked backwards from the 2028 election because that's when they want to see these changes happen. Legislation takes time. It takes time for them to decide, and they need the proposals by this date. And then it just so happens that's why we only got 3 months. So they've kind of been working backwards from the 2028 election. One of the proposals in the joint regional submission that we did to the government was to extend the current term we're in right now to 4 years to give us more time to have this amalgamation conversation, because the mayors of the region acknowledged that 3 years was too quick to have this conversation. 4 is the right amount. And now we've got 3 months.
Surprise.
Yay.
I'm just going to bring this up so we can all read them. Question for panel: if council has to amalgamate, Hutt Valley residents have been demanding for public transport routes from Lower Hutt to Porirua, Johnsonville, Tawa Airport. What will amalgamate council do? Good question. Like, this is something that the regional council currently manages. They are about to consult on their bus routes in July. 3rd of July, their consultation starts, so definitely have your say there. I know a little bit about it because I heard from a regional council last night at a community meeting on exactly this question, particularly the Lower Hutt to Porirua route, which is one that often comes up, is where would you start it and where would you finish it? There aren't sort of 2 big masses of people at either end. Would it be Manor Park to Plimerton or Parramatta, or it's a tricky one to navigate.
This is a good question. This
one.
the airport above.
That one?
Yeah.
Cool.
I want to ask that later. So I think we should probably acknowledge that, first of all, there is already a great deal of sharing that already happens across the region. Both Emma and I are both on the regional committee around solid waste minimisation, because you cannot do waste minimisation from a council only perspective. You actually do need to have collaboration, especially when you're trying to get big solutions, big infrastructure to do that. It is limited in terms of how you implement that, because each of the councils are required to put their own plan in place, and that requires them to go through their LTP, and that's required to go through the legal process that the Local Government Act requires us to do. So there is already sharing of services in that regard. Te Aki Wai, when previously Wellington Water was a version of that, again compromised by the very fact that we had to do it all by individual councils. There will be other instances at the Te Awadua Porirua, where we are working with Greater Wellington and Wellington City, because water has no boundaries. It doesn't care for where it's Wellington or Porirua City Council. We have an obligation to improve the waterways that feed into our 2 harbours that bear that is the source of our name.
Yeah, and in the Hutt as well, like, we have a shared services committee which looks after Silverstream landfill is the landfill for the valley. We also co-own our 1 wastewater treatment plant. The pipes go from the very top of Upper Hutt all the way down to Seaview. and we co-own that, we co-run that, we co-manage it. So there are the pound, yep. So the animal control Hutt City provides for Auckland, Upper Hutt. That'd be a weird amalgamation move. We're joining Auckland.
The commute.
Yeah.
South Auckland.
South Auckland. Yeah, but there's definitely more that can be done. Like I said earlier in the stream, like one way or another, we do need to work together on more shared services because we're losing the regional council, who at the moment is a regional shared service for a number of things like public transport. What's this one here? Cool. So we're going to answer a few more questions. Where's the time? We're at 56 minutes. We're going to try and hit an hour. And then, like I say, if there's still more questions and there's more information that comes out, we'll almost certainly commit to doing another one of these live streams, and we'll try and get some people from Wairarapa in and also Kapiti. I'd like to see a slightly bigger room with some air conditioning would be lovely. So Kenny, with elections coming up shortly, could all of this be scrapped if a new party comes into power? Yes, was the answer. It could.
And I guess there was the Ben made the point before about contacting ministers of the current government about your thoughts. I mean, you can also contact opposition parties and ask for their thoughts and whether or not they have what they are prepared to commit to prior to that, because I mean that would help us a lot.
I think totally agree with that. I also am mindful that in an MMP environment, we could go into an election where parties have been given very clear statements, and then as part of the coalition negotiations, something very different comes out of it. Don't you just love the MMP system? But there's an inevitability. But it is certainly true that the trajectory of travel, if the current government is still in power after the election, will be very similar to the current trajectory now. So I guess, as close as I'm going to say that without being even more bloody partisan. So there you go.
Yeah, and the reality is that we'd already decided we were going to have a conversation about amalgamation. So while some of our comments may have come across like we're not up for that conversation, we've already decided we were going to have that conversation. For me, the biggest concerns is just the time frame. Exactly this question here that Andrea's asking. What's the hurry? The hurry is that the government has told us we've got 6 weeks to amalgamate all of our councils. That's the reality.
And I think also it's key to say that participating in the discussions is not agreeing to amalgamation. What we're doing at the moment is agreeing to have the discussion about what would be the best way forward.
I was just going to say, it's about good faith. I think councils want to, be the adults in the room. They want to work in good faith with central government. We have already indicated that we're going to go down this path of having the conversation, and I welcome that opportunity to have this debate. But if the other party isn't working in good faith, in my opinion, it does complicate our ability to have a solution that people are going to feel like actually made sense to them and will make sense to them in the years to come.
It's one about how we can get a stronger voice for the Wellington region. Down.
There we go. Cool. Good question to end on.
So in a sense, we've already talked a bit about this, but it is up to you and your participation in this. Right now, we don't have policy from opposition parties, and we have that, at least under the current coalition arrangement, that the government parties, New Zealand First and National, are going to proceed with this. To get a stronger voice, inherently that's going to come at the election time. But you can influence things. Parties have manifestos, parties have policies. MPs do, and councillors, we do read what you send to us, even if you don't necessarily always get a response. There's a very good chance that someone's actually seeing what's being written and being said, and sentiment gets tracked very much. So, I would sort of have no doubt that if the inboxes of, sort of a few New Zealand First and ACT MPs got flooded in the next few weeks, that you could suddenly see a bit of sentiment shift within the governing coalition. But that is the democratic system that we operate in. Certainly we'll do our best. Andrew Little has, committed to leading this up and having a really mature conversation with government. He meets with the PM quite often. He's, brought these issues to the fore, but it is fundamentally a political decision. There's been a few comments around, this has been some political or partisan takes here, but this is politics at its most pure. We are responding to an incredibly political decision in a completely political environment.
Yep. And our job is to understand the opportunities and the risks associated with all of that, and to be able to bring that together at our respective councils to be able to put forward a voice in a way that we feel best represents the communities that we represent.
Cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, to the hundreds of you that have watched this live and engaged with the comments. But there'll also be thousands of you probably that watch it after it's live. So still drop your comments into the into the video and we can address them over text. And like I said, I'm pretty keen to do another one of these once there's a little bit more details. Maybe the week before the sign off, we could at least put the proposal up and talk to it. If we are so fortunate to have that amount of time on our hands. So thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Ka kite.
Mā te wā.
Bye.